Okay, so here's a passage, and I'll let you read this. I won't reread it from a very old book, but a very important one in economics. So, Adam Smith, generally speaking, credited as the founding father of economics. And so he has this famous work called The Wealth of Nations, where he kind of lays out a lot of the main ideas that provide the foundation for economics. Here's a passage from that book that lays out a very interesting idea. And to kind of summarize, what he notes is that water is essential. Right? So my demand for water, or willingness to pay for water, is going to be very high. Right? All else, if I can only buy one thing, that thing is going to be water. Right? If I don't have any other way to obtain it. So my willingness to pay for water is very high. Diamonds are not essential. Right? Regardless of what they tell you in the diamond commercials or other shows that we see on, The Bachelor and the Bachelorette, something like that, right? They maybe claim that diamonds are more essential, but I assure you, as far as life goes, life and death, diamonds are much less essential. So my willingness to pay in that sense should, in theory, be much lower than water. Or demand, at least, is going to be much smaller on the whole. Now, where's the paradox? The paradox comes from the fact that water is extremely cheap and diamonds are very expensive. So how do I explain that, right? You would think, based on willingness to pay, water should be much more expensive than diamonds are. But we see the opposite. So what's going on? What's going on is that there's a much greater supply of water, right? So if I was to draw out demand and supply, and so maybe I'll just go to a different document here so you can see it a little more clearly. And I'm going to draw quantity and price. And what we're sort of noting for water is that demand is very high. Right? So if I draw a demand for water relative to, say, demand for diamonds, so let's make diamonds a different color, I guess. Make it green. Right, so the way to read this is at a given price, you would want to buy a lot more water than you would diamonds, right? Water is the more essential of the two, and we'd have more people wanting water at that price than we would diamonds. The rub is the supply of water is also much higher than the supply of diamonds. So the equilibrium price of water is likely to be relatively low, which is what we see, and we have a very large quantity of water produced and consumed. As opposed to diamonds, the supply is very low, right? So the supply of diamonds is much less than the supply of water. And so that's why we see fewer diamonds bought and sold at a much higher price. It's because the supply is much less, right? So what we learn here is that to understand what we're observing in the world, I need to consider both demand and supply and the two relative to each other. So the size of the market, how many people are producing and selling the goods, combined with how many people want to buy it, all factor into the ultimate price and quantity that I see bought and sold. So that's kind of a fun example and a very useful one to think about. So here's a couple more examples that we can try to make sense of, that use our ability to understand demand and supply to make sense of the world that we're living in. Okay, so try these on your own before you see what I do and kind of see how your analysis compares. So Here in this first one, the price of insulin injection kits increases from $45 to $52, but the equilibrium quantity remains the same. And so I've got to piece together what happened in demand and supply in order to make sense of this. All right. So give that one a try. See what you come up with. Give this next one a try, which talks about red peppers and green peppers. Okay, so red peppers have more nutritional value than green peppers. So they have more vitamin C. And so all else the same, I should want more red peppers, right? If you gave me the choice at the same price, demand for red peppers is much higher than green peppers. However, what I see, right? So that would say that red peppers should be more expensive, but I buy more of them. But what I see in reality is that red peppers are more expensive, but there are much fewer of them. Okay, so the price is high, but the quantity is low. So try to think through with demand and supply, draw it out, and see if you can explain it. In the next video, I'll kind of walk through how I think of these problems, and we'll see where we line up.